And we are back. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to part 2 of what I think is going to be probably a 4-part series. This episode is all about, this is the real meat of this series. This is where we're actually going to create and develop our bot. Everything from the actual wireframing to the software that are required to the integration at the end with Zapier. Although I did make a previous video about this subject, I want to give a bit more context as to why we develop things the way we do. Let's start with the simple stuff. The software is going to be used. There's 3 big ones that are required. All of them have to some extent a free version, from Voiceflow, which is what we are going to be actually designing the conversations. Zapier, which is when it's going to connect our bots to outside applications, whether that's Google Calendar, that's Google Sheets, as well as email. And then Stack AI, which is the actual backend with the intelligent part of it. You can look more into all of them. I will show you how to actually use these softwares, but every single one of them has its purpose in this presentation. The main workflow is separated into 4 different categories, and we'll go through each one. But as an overview, the first step is really just saying hi, setting up the software. Step 2 is actually designing the actual conversation or where we want it to go. Step 3 is building out responses and testing. And step 4 is actually integrating Zapier into the end, or whenever the action is completed, you want some sort of action to happen, whether that's you want to be aware of somebody has booked an appointment, or for example, somebody had a question that our AI wasn't able to answer, you could also be aware of that or made aware of. Let's go. So the first thing you want to do is actually go over to voiceflow.com. Now it's going to look something like this the first time you actually log in. I'm going to go ahead and skip this part, but basically just make an account. You're going to want to create a new assistant, and then you'll have a screen that looks something a bit like this. Now, once you've actually made your assistant, it should look something like this. You can go ahead and delete all of this. So once you've actually deleted everything and you've got a blank canvas, step 1 is greeting and giving options as to what the different bots or what your bot is actually going to do. So for this example, I'm going to keep it very basic, and it's going to have 3 main components. So the first thing you want to do is come here. We're going to make it talk. And now Voiceflow is actually pretty simple, so most of the stuff is pretty self-explanatory. I like to just call this block hi. And then you're probably going to have different options as far as to what can people do on your bot. For most cases, it's going to be ask a question, book an appointment, or leave a complaint. So you want to head over to the button tab and drag it right underneath hi. And now this is where you'll actually put different options that people have. So let's say if somebody has a question. So one of the options is going to be ask a question. There's going to be another button for I want to book an appointment. Let me make myself a bit smaller so I don't take up everything. And lastly, let's put something like issue. And for this one, we'll add one more. And shout out to Ali from Red AI. That's where I got this idea, or this option as well. If somebody, especially if you're working for local businesses, a lot of times people want to know where are you guys, or what area do you serve? So that's a very common question. Now, once you've done that, part 2 is the actual wireframing. Now, for anybody who's done development, I'm sure you know what this is, but if you're unaware, whenever you build out large applications, the first thing you'd like to do is basically just sketch out what it's going to look like. So just like a very simple version on the outside. It's like drawing. You're wireframing it. So just things that are connected to each other things. In this case, it's going to be nodes. So let's go ahead and do that. The only thing you're going to need to know beforehand is what information do you want. Now, this could depend a lot on what type of business you're serving. If, for example, you are doing a plumbing business, then one thing that would probably be very important to know is whether the house or the residence is connected to the municipal water supply, or is it a separate one that the owner has on their own. For example, if you're doing solar, then you probably want to know, well, is the house facing towards the sun? Is it facing away? Are there trees, these sorts of requirements. I'm going to keep it very basic as far as we just want their name, their number, their email, their address, as well as the date that they want to book an appointment on. Now, if we go back into Voiceflow, then we go to book an appointment because that's what they're going to want to do. We're going to say just a short message to confirm that this is the option they've chosen. So now, if you see my previous video, this is probably going to be very repetitive. So feel free to skip ahead if there's anything that you feel you already know. After that, we're going to want to. Now, after that, we're going to want to have another name variable. And then we're going to want to do email. Now, you could do this however you'd like. This is just one way of structuring it. There isn't really any sort of logic behind what comes before, what comes after. If you had more intimate questions, then yes, I would leave them for the beginning, or more value-adding questions, for example. Like if we go back to the plumbing thing, if the importance, the first questions are usually the most important ones, which is why it's cool to start off with contact info. Because now one cool thing about this is that, for example, let's say somebody goes in and they put their phone number, they put their name, but something happens, they get distracted. Well, in your analytics, you can actually see what people answered. So you'll be able to you can also tell you can always call them. And last but not least, we're going to put phone number here. Now, once you've got the basic information that you want to collect, the last thing for this example is that somebody wants to book an appointment. So we're going to have one more time. It's going to be a big one. You're going to say book appointment date. Now, once they've actually selected the appointment date that they wanted, it is then going to go into Zapier, which I'll explain in a little bit. And once they've actually gone over to Zapier, confirmation. And I always like to end that off with, do you have any more questions? Now, the reason why we do it like this, well, this might seem a bit redundant. It's now at least you have a good understanding of everything that you are trying to do and what the actual main flow is supposed to look like. So we know, okay, well, first you're going to get greeted, then they're going to be asked what is the purpose of this conversation. Then they're going to get some information is going to be collected. After that, they're going to book the appointment date. That date, all that info is going to be sent over to Zapier. They're going to get confirmation, and then they're going to be asked whether or not they have more questions. Pretty straightforward. Now on to step 3, the meatiest part of this video, which is actually building the robot. Now, as you'll go along, you'll see how simple Voiceflow makes this for you. And keep in mind, whenever you're on Voiceflow, for those who are new with this platform, everything you do is from the perspective of the assistant or the robot. So when it says talk, that's you actually speaking to the customer. When it says listen, that's you waiting to hear something back. Just something to keep in mind, because as this can be quite confusing. So the first thing we want to do is, okay, look, we're booking them in, then we want their name. So we're going to want to go ahead on this little capture icon right here, and we're going to put it there. Now, once you're actually in the capture card, one thing, the way Voiceflow works is it works with entities, or if you've done programming, you can think of these as objects or variables. Now, you're going to want to create a new entity, and you're going to create a new entity for every piece of information that you want to know. So we're going to create one for name, one for the email address, one for the actual address of the residence, one for the customer's phone number, as well as one last one for the requested appointment date. And the reason why we do this is because after all of this is done, these entities are what is actually going to be sent over to Zapier, which is what on the other side, this which you're going to receive. So whenever somebody books an appointment, for example, you're the one who's going to get the entities as the values that they provided. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and create a new entity. We're going to call it user name. You can ignore this. No, sorry. This is the actual. You're going to go ahead and create a new entity, and we're going to call this one user name. And the type, a lot of the types they're very similar across projects. But for this instance, we're going to name this one name. Now this just means that Voiceflow is going to recognize the name as the entity. So for example, if somebody says, hey, my name is Ashley, then it's not going to take, if you have to recall that information later, it's not going to take the entire sentence of my name is Ashley. You're going to say, hey, Ashley. And you can use that for other entities as well. So for actually, URLs, key phrases, age, things of that nature. And you can also make custom ones. Now, once you've actually made the capture username card, you're going to want to make the robot a little bit more human. And you can do that by simply saying, humanizing what it says as far as when it's talking to the customer. So you could say something like, what's your name? Now, one great way to actually humanize your robot is to just make AI generate different ways of saying the same sentences. Now, one good way is, I'll show an example here where it says, what's your name? Now I'm telling it, hey, look, generate me a couple more examples. Generate me 3 more examples. What is your name? May I know your name? And now you can press enter or delete if whether or not you agree with these variations. Perfect. Now, every time that somebody uses, it's a 1 of 3 chance of getting one of these. And simply put, you just basically do the same thing for every single one of these nodes or cards, as they're called. So for email, we're going to make a new listen card, a new capture. This one is going to be another new entity. We're going to call this one email. The type is going to be email as well. Great entity. What is your email? You can make it do 3 more variants, but just for this case, I'll leave it as is. Once it's actually captured it, go over to this. Entity. And this is going to be a address. It should have geography. There we go. So you're starting to get the hang of it, see how it is pretty straightforward once you get the hang of it. Go back to the number. We got 2 more. This is going to be a phone number. Now be careful between the phone numbers and numbers, as that can have an impact. Because if somebody enters 3 numbers and you put the type as entity number, you're going to accept that as their correct entity. But if you put it as phone number, it's going to have at least a certain amount of numbers before it's considered as a correct phone number. And now we are basically done with the very simple variables. Now you can go ahead and add as many nodes or cards as you need for your specific business. You can really get very creative with it, but just for the purposes, and they all follow the same sort of path, which is just you ask a question and you capture whatever that question is. If it is a question that is outside the regular entities, you create your own one and just give it a bunch of synonyms so that the system can then start to not analyze, but understand what is the information that you're looking for. Now, once you're done with that, you're going to want to go ahead and connect the last card that you have. For this example, we're going to use a book appointment date capture card. And what we're going to do, we're going to come here, go to capture, put it right down here. And we're going to say, I want to capture the entire user reply. And that's going to be last utterance. Now, the thing you want to do right after this, the reason why we're leaving it blank is because this is such a vague statement that it's be difficult for Voice AI alone, or Voiceflow, alone, to figure out what exactly the customer is asking for. Well, let me put something like, when would you like us come? And you could even put like, we've got dates from Monday, Friday, 1 a.m. to 4 p.m. and you're going to say, hey, look, everything, whatever the customer answers, that's what you're going to keep as the entire user reply. If you're expecting a lower number of customers, probably from the range of 100 to 200 a month, I suggest actually integrating in a more smarter version of this where the AI would actually transform whatever sentence was said into a standardized date and time format. However, if you have more volume, keep in mind that every time you run any sort of AI task or any sort of AI request that requires GPT, it's consuming tokens, or basically it's costing you money. So if you have a large amount of volume, this money can actually quickly stack up, and you have to sort of do a balancing act between, do I want to save money and make it faster, or do I just want to get the information in and then figure out and have some sort of Zapier integration where you can then standardize everything afterwards? It's really up to you. Now we're going to connect this to Zapier. Now on Zapier's side, it's actually pretty straightforward. We don't even need a text block. All we need is we're going to go to Dev, we're going to go to API, put it right here, and we can delete this. And now we're going to tell us, we're going to send, and as I mentioned in the previous video, the way APIs work, at least in this specific context, it's pretty straightforward. You either get information from a data source or you put information into a data source. So now what we want to do, since we already have the information on our end, we want to send it over to, for example, a Google Sheet where you can have all of the customers who've actually gone through this bot. So for that, we're going to use post. And now we're actually going to head over to Zapier. And you're going to go ahead and create a new Zap. Now, setting up a Zapier account is pretty straightforward. I do believe there is a free plan for about 5 Zaps. But once you get the hang of it, and once you have more, if you're using more Zaps, it means that the bot is working, which means that it's worth investing into more and more Zaps. So for this example, we're going to say the first thing, whatever we want to trigger the Zap as it's referred to, is going to be a webhook. Because if you remember on Voiceflow, what we did was we initiated a webhook, or we posted one, or threw one. Now on Zapier's side, we actually want to catch the webhook, or get it, or sorry, catch it. Get would be when there is no post, you just want to actually go and retrieve information. Now it's going to give you a website URL, a webhook URL. You're going to go ahead and copy that and go over to Voiceflow, and that's what you're going to use as the request URL. Then, but what information, because now this is pretty much empty. But what information do you want to put in? That's like pretty straightforward. You're going to go into body, and remember all of the entities that we created earlier? That's the information you're going to put here. And the way it works is there's keys and there's variables. Keys is the thing that's going to be the same on both sides. So if you've got a name, if the name key is on this side, which on Voiceflow's side, you're going to replicate that on Zapier's end. So on our end, we had name, and the value for name was username. And whenever you want to call a variable, you can always just use those open brackets. We also had an email. This is where those entities come into play. We had an address. You had a number. And you can go on and on for all of the questions that you might have asked. And last but not least, we also had and now I'm noticing that we forgot an actual variable here, but the last one is going to be appointment date. For that, we're going to create a new appointment date. And we're actually going to make a new little card right here. I'm going to put it as set. And all this is going to say is that we're going to set the last utterance to a variable called appointment set. We're going to set the appointment date to the variable last utterance. Now, once you've actually gone ahead and set that new variable, we're going to reconnect that back to Zapier. Now, this should work. The way we're going to test this out, we're actually going to send a request. Now, you can put any dummy information, doesn't really matter, as long as it's congruent or as long as it makes sense with the variable that you're putting in. Now, 200 means it works. So let's go check on the other side. If you go back to Zapier, and you say test trigger, you should be able to check all the information that you just put in should be right here. And the one thing that we're going to do right now is we're going to send, okay, well, I've got lots of information. I want to send it over to a Google Sheet, for example. Now, once you're actually in your new sheet, you're going to remember all those keys that we spoke about. You're going to want to use the same ones for the actual sheet. And then if we go to extension, now you're going to want to create a new spreadsheet row. Enter your email, enter your drive as well. Now it's going to give you a bunch of spreadsheets to choose from. Just choose whichever one is related to your business. Now once you've chosen that, choose the works as well. Now there should only be one in there. And now all the data that was on your actual Google Sheet should be right here. And this is where we're able to go ahead and mix and match. So we want the name for the name, the email for the email, and so on and so forth. Go ahead and test all of that. Now, if everything was done correctly, you should see all of the information right here. All right, and we are basically done with the main component or the main action that we want your customers to take on your actual bot. Now, the next step involves actually creating not only the Q&A aspect of your bot, but the actual knowledge base. So where is your bot going to get this information from? It's going to come into 3 steps. First is understanding what your customers' needs are, what do they usually ask, as well as where does your bot get that information from, how's the information organized so it's not only accurate, but it's also fast. And then lastly, we're going to use natural language processing, which is basically just taking a human sentence and transforming it into something that your bot can understand to figure out the intent or what sort of information does your customer actually want. But we'll talk more about that in the next video. In the meanwhile, thank you for watching this. I hope you found some value in it. I know it's people who already watched the previous video. This might have been seem like a bit repetitive, but I really want to go more into detail and context about why we do certain things and take my time. In the meanwhile, next episode should be coming either tomorrow or after tomorrow. If you've got any questions, feel free to either reach out at the email address that's provided below or on Discord or wherever you can find me. Feel free to say hello. I appreciate you guys taking your time. If there's anything I can help with, let me know. If not, I'll talk to you in the next video. Thank you.